One of the earliest subjects I covered on my channel 6 years ago is one of my favorite game franchises from when I was a kid, Jak and Daxter. Doing these games again has been on the cards for years now, and after having redone the classic Ratchet & Clank games last summer, I figured doing the 6 Jak and Daxter games again this summer would be a natural follow-up. Today we're covering Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, and then next week it'll be Jak 2, then Jak 3, then Jak X Combat Racing right after that, then Daxter for PSP, and finally Jak and Daxter the Lost Frontier. I'm pretty excited to talk about these games again and give them the definitive videos they deserve because, like I said, this series, alongside its brethren, Ratchet & Clank and Sly Cooper, was very important in my development as a video game enthusiast. But before we get into it, I wanted to make it clear to the audience that I have spent my life searching for the answers that my friend and my friend's best friend failed to find. Who is the sponsor of today's video, and what is their product? I have asked the plants, but they do not remember. The plants have asked the rocks, but the rocks do not recall. Even the rocks do not recall. Every bone in my body tells me that the answer is Factor is the sponsor of today's video. Get fresh, ready-made meals delivered to your doorstep when you sign up with Factor. No more meal prep to spend time on, dishes to have to clean, no more trashy fast food because Factor's chef-created meals are fresh, never frozen, and are designed by dietitians to ensure every meal is nutritional. Meals come together in minutes, taking the guesswork out of what to make for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Factor even accommodates folks with a variety of different diet lifestyles, including keto, low-calorie, vegan, and vegetarian lifestyles. With over 27 meal options each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy with Factor. Meal plans range from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can add more or reduce the number depending on your specific needs. You can easily modify food preferences and skip a week if you feel so inclined. So if you want to get in on the action, use my link or go to gofactor75.com and use code POGJReviews120 for $120 off across 5 boxes. Factor's been a great aid for me because of the fact that meal prep for the week takes time and energy away from making epic videos like the one you're about to see, and I always hate cleaning up dishes and stuff after preparing something, one of the main reasons I tend to skip breakfast if I can, but now, thanks to Factor, I don't have to do it that way, and you can join in by using the link below or the code I mentioned before. Thanks again to Factor for being the sponsor of today's video. Now, without further ado, let's not delay a moment longer and talk about Naughty Dog's PS2 masterpiece, Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy from 2001. Man, it's crazy how much time flies. I mean, this game is 21 years old this year. For context, a 21-year-old game when Jak and Daxter hit the PS2 was Pac-Man in arcades. I don't know, it's just funny to me to think about how old games from the early 2000s are now, despite once being the apex of gaming. But since I'm on the subject of history, how did Jak and Daxter come to be? Well, like I said, the game was developed by Naughty Dog, who made a name for themselves on the PlayStation 1 with Crash Bandicoot, which first released in 1996. If you watched my video on Ratchet & Clank 1 last year, this story should be familiar. Crash was very successful, but this presented a problem in that Naughty Dog developed a good relationship with PlayStation, but Crash as a character was owned by Universal, so the profits on the Crash series got split 3 ways. So Naughty Dog decided that they were going to cut the middleman out and work directly with Sony on the PlayStation 2 with a new franchise, which meant saying goodbye to Crash, which I don't think was a mistake at all. They basically exhausted all they really could do with that series by Crash 3. A game full of different minigames and power-ups to really squeeze the juice out of that particular lemon. The last Crash game they did was Crash Team Racing in 1999, and while that was in development, members of the team got to work on conceptualizing their new game for the PlayStation 2. A console that was leaps and bounds more powerful than the PS1, giving Naughty Dog the vision for what this game was going to be. Before they even had characters and a story, the one-sentence description of the new game was that it was going to be an entirely seamless, load-time-free world. In games prior to this, especially on PlayStation 1, you'd beat a level, go to a loading screen, and get hit with a menu of some kind and then pick the next stage. Even when they did have characters and a story, one of the biggest talking points with the Precursor Legacy was that you could walk on foot from the starting point of the game all the way to the final boss without seeing one loading screen. The manual, like Ratchet & Clank, is a giant pamphlet where one side shows the entire map of the game and how it connects, and in-game it lines up perfectly. The other side of the manual is this cool poster of Jak riding the Zoomer alongside an ad for Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. No real reason to mention that, it's just that it's the first game in the goated trilogy. How could I not mention it? Immersion was one of the biggest things I wanted to achieve with Jak 1, and the game not having to stop and load was one of the biggest achievements the team pulled off with this game. In the PlayStation Magazine article regarding Jak and Daxter, the writer even slipped in a dig at Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, the game that had recently released on the PS2 and was the first Crash platformer not developed by Naughty Dog. something made apparent with its lacking visuals and poor optimization as the game took upwards of 20 to 30 seconds to load in new stages. I'm sure Naughty Dog felt the same way as this writer though. To them, seeing their old series be more stagnant in this area only reaffirmed that they were going in a good direction with Jak. But that's all talk of what they wanted this game to feel like. What kind of game is this? Well, the basic concept is that you play as Jak, a mute character who loves adventure alongside his wisecracking friend Daxter. The two of them defy the demands of Samos the Sage and travel to Misty Island where they uncover a plot to destroy the world from two mysterious figures and their army of lurkers. Jak and Daxter walk up to a pool of dark eco, and once Daxter falls into it, he's turned into a half-otter, half-weasel called an Ottsel. And after getting chewed out by Samos, they learn that only Gall Acheron, the sage of dark eco, has a chance of returning Daxter to his human form. But since none of the other sages have turned their teleporter gates on for a while, they have to travel by foot with the help of Samos' daughter, Kira, the village mechanic. Samos is the sage of green eco, eco being the source that all life comes from. Each type of eco has a different sage: green, blue, red, yellow, and dark eco. Jak has a mysterious power to channel eco in a way nobody else can. The world is a very mysterious one because of the fact that it was created by the Precursors, but no one knows who they were and why they're gone, but they've left behind fascinating technological cities and machines you can see all throughout the game. And with all that set up, the player is good to go on their journey. But that merely answers what the plot is. What kind of game is this? When Naughty Dog was developing Crash for the PlayStation 1, they modeled the gameplay after what was already familiar to them. Games like Donkey Kong Country, but in a 3D space. This being the format that kept evolving as they made an entire trilogy out of it by 1998. When Crash 1 released on PS1, the N64 received Super Mario 64, the game that revolutionized how 3D platforming would feel from its analog stick movement to its mission-based item collection gameplay. This birthed the collectathon genre, where you'd search areas for collectibles that were tied to your progression. Point being, when doing their new PS2 epic, Naughty Dog wanted to move on from the level-to-level style that Crash had perfected in the 90s and do something more like Mario 64, but not a copy. One thing they often repeated in the promotional material for the game was that they wanted to have a mix between the platforming and item collection of Super Mario 64, but mix it with the epic scale and scope of Nintendo's other N64 classic, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So that's what you get, an epic fantasy quest with Jak and his sarcastic sidekick Daxter as you journey across the land with platforming challenges in abundance as you scour the areas in search of precursor orbs, a collectible currency, and power cells, the main thing that Jak and Daxter need to find in order to progress to different areas. So in spirit, it's the same kind of idea as Super Mario 64, but they stress that immersion in the world is one of their goals, like I said. This manifested in the gameplay because the objectives in Jak and Daxter are all contextualized. In Mario 64, you do tasks and objectives for no real reason besides the game telling you that was your current objective. In Jak, you can look at several missions to show how they designed a more thought-out world. In the Forbidden Jungle, you have one mission that sees Jak redirecting the eco beam from one lens to another. Why? Well, that's because the eco beam is what powers Sandover Village, and the mayor thinks the eco beam being down will kill his re-election, so he offers Jak and Daxter a power cell if they can fix it for him. Kira has sent 7 scout flies to every area in the game, and your reward for collecting them is a power cell. But the reason you collect them is because the lurkers captured all the scout flies in hidden boxes. You lose out on this power cell because a pelican eats it from the ground, so you have to chase the pelican to get it back. You lead the lightning moles back to their burrow in the Precursor Basin because the local geologist is concerned about them. You fire at these lurkers eating these support beams in the spider cave because Gordy, a local miner, tells you it's important to keep the cave intact. You rescue this muse on Misty Island because he belongs to the sculptor in Sandover Village and he needs it for his inspiration, and your reward is, you guessed it, a power cell. Not every mission is super fun. I mean, herding the yak cows for the farmer is really dull and is right at the start of the game, and I don't like aiming yellow eco to hit targets. I've just always felt like the aiming is really finicky. But I'm just saying that the world is cohesive. The end result is always you getting a power cell like any other collectathon, but each task achieves something in the world you're playing in. The missions also have cause and effect. Like how you rescue the Flut from this ledge in Sentinel Beach, and then that allows you to ride the Flut in the boggy swamp and the snowy mountain. To even reach Misty Island, you need to help the fisherman in the Forbidden Jungle, where he gives you a power cell and permission to use his speedboat. His regular boat is broken, and this is also contextualized as a part of the game.
Did you see the size of the bite that lurker shark took out of the fisherman's boat? We best stay way clear of them!
Naturally, there are boundaries in the world, but instead of having the player run into an invisible wall, if you swim out too far, you'll have to hear this sound. Which means that the lurker shark will eat you if you don't turn back fast enough. You get eaten by a shark for swimming too far out of bounds. I just think that that's clever. Of course, none of this would be nearly as effective without fun gameplay, and Jak and Daxter more than delivers on that. Jak is just one of those video game characters who's fundamentally enjoyable to control. His moveset's pretty simple. You run with the analog stick, jump with the X button, and pressing it again will double jump, square is a punch attack, square followed by X is an uppercut, circle is a spin attack, triangle goes into first person mode, which is contextualized on Jack's character design, by the way. The first person viewing mode is why Jack wears goggles. Figured I'd mention that. At a standstill, L1 allows Jack to crouch, and jumping in this state does a high jump, and on the move, you roll and roll jump. In addition to that, Jack has the power to channel different types of eco. Blue eco making you move faster and allowing you to operate Precursor technology, green eco replenishing your health if you collect 50 small ones or one big one, red eco making your attacks far more powerful, killing everything in the surrounding area in one hit, and yellow eco allowing Jack to shoot fireballs from his hand. Just don't fall into dark eco, that's an instant game over. What I've always loved about Jack's moveset is how seamlessly you can transition between these things.
We've created kind of a unique system for blending different animations to create smooths between what would be two totally separate animations in most other games now. I'll give you an example of this. If you're running along, you may be halfway in speed between a walk and a run. Well, what our game will do is it'll take the walk animation, it'll take the run animation, and it'll evenly blend between them to create a new frame that represents where your feet would be if you're running at that speed.
His run can go right into a kick, and there's no pop or click, and it just is seamlessly smooth.
For example, you can uppercut into the air and then rapidly do a dive attack, and from there you can do a spin attack if you need to, or just keep diving back up and down. It feels great to use the roll as an attack by just barreling into the enemies and killing them in one hit. I also love using the high jump you get when jumping immediately out of the roll jump. It's super satisfying and it makes you feel like a gaming guru when you pull it off and make it look effortless. Jack is just very mobile and that's fun to mess around with, like in the first boss against this plant enemy. After you kill his minions, he shows you his weak spot that you're supposed to climb the pedals in order to hit, but if you have good timing, you can just uppercut right into the weak spot and damage him that way. Side note, I love how throughout the Forbidden Jungle you see these vines attack you from the ground, but once you kill this plant boss, those vines from before are all dead. Just some more world building. As I was saying, this is a moveset where things feel useful as attacks and as platforming options. I just said the roll, which is meant to pick up your speed, can be used as an attack. But the spin is another example where its primary function is to hurt enemies, but in the air you can use it to get some extra airtime and to break your fall from large heights. The combat is just so satisfying in this game because of how smooth it feels to execute these different commands, and when you hit an enemy, you feel it with the sound design. This game just looks and sounds great. I just brought up the sounds from attacking enemies, but then the music also amplifies the atmosphere. Josh Mansell returned from the Crash Bandicoot games to deliver the score for the Precursor Legacy. A soundtrack with equal parts tranquil atmosphere, foreboding atmosphere, whimsy, mystery, frantic action, and climactic action whenever appropriate. The visuals are also stunning for 2001 standards, as the game renders all these different environments that have a variety of different enemies and high-quality textures with no visible loading screens. The game also sports an organic day-to-night transition with two different morning skyboxes for variety's sake, one with more bright yellow lighting and another with a green tint to capture the atmosphere of more subdued mornings. The graphics are great for their time, but what has not aged a day would be the animation. I think at the time of this game's release, the animation was simply unrivaled. In the gameplay, it's top-notch, exaggerating the character's movements with squash and stretch to make the gameplay more satisfying, like how Jack's arm extends when punching, or how when kicking or uppercutting, Daxter will go flying off of Jack's body, but his arms will cartoonishly stretch as he pulls himself back to you.
We're looking for impact that couldn't possibly be achieved through conventional means like motion capture. We want to see the character jump and stretch to twice his height, or if he's punching, we want to see that fist be twice as big as it normally is.
When running in low water, Jack will be slowed down and move like a human would in that situation. When you're swimming, you can see Daxter shivering from the water. When you're rolling, you can see Jack's hair go in the motion of the flip. This game is jam-packed with details in its animations. The greatest example being the various power cell grab animations, an iconic element of the series as they have a variety of different poses and moves from Daxter whenever you get one. They had several members of the dev team just working on the cinematics alone, some talent even coming from outside the video game industry like Disney and Nickelodeon to help perfect the animation. Despite the models looking blocky by today's standards, I can't help but be really impressed with just how much detail there is in the character's moves in every scene, like how Daxter's laughing at Samos for falling through the warp gate in the Red Sage's lab. Or just the way Daxter moves in most of the scenes would serve as a good example. The facial expressions also convey a wide range of emotions alongside the movements of the characters. This scene prior to the Claw boss fight serves as a good example.
Wait! I'll stay here and protect Kira. Jack, I think you're ready to handle that monster without me.
Oh, really heroic of you.
The only issue I could bring up with the cutscenes is just that they're unskippable. When you get into the game, this doesn't present a huge issue as there aren't that many cutscenes from start to finish, but the game opens on a lengthy scene of Jak and Daxter going to Misty Island and getting chewed out by Samos afterwards. The scene at the start of Volcanic Crater also goes on for a few minutes. This had to have been intentional since you could skip the cutscenes in the Crash games, so my only conclusion is that they thought that being able to skip the cutscenes would break the total immersion they were going for, or they just thought that the animation work they did was so great that players had to see them. It also could have been both of those things. The logic isn't faulty, the animation work is fantastic, but if you've played the game as many times as I have over the years, it does weigh on you a bit when getting back into it, knowing that the cutscene with Jak's uncle or the sculptor cannot be skipped when trying to go for 100% completion. I note this because I think the Precursor Legacy offers a lot in terms of replayability. For one thing, I love how each mission in the game has a reason to exist, like I said before, so each mission has a quest giver you can contact. However, you almost never have to talk to quest givers in order to do missions. For example, Kira tells Jak and Daxter that they could explore the temple in the Forbidden Jungle in order to activate the blue eco vents, but you don't actually have to activate this cutscene in order for the mission to be done. If you know what you're doing, you can just rescue the Muse from Misty Island, the Flut from the ledge, reroute the eco beams, release the blimp from the boggy swamp, and destroy the eco crystals in the spider caves entirely without being told to do so, which cuts down on the amount of cutscenes you'd have to watch in a second playthrough. I literally did not know that the support beams mission in the spider cave was a quest you got from the miners until this playthrough. I just go to them for their 4 power cells. Nor did I remember that the poison plants mission in the Precursor Basin and the revisit to Misty Island were directives from Samos, but I don't have to remember that because the game doesn't require it. The only exceptions to this rule both come in the Precursor Basin, where you need to talk to this gambler in order to activate the racetrack you need to beat the best time on, and to rescue the lightning moles you'd have to talk to the geologist first. Jak also encourages replayability through my favorite subject, stage routing. When you start the game, you have the choice between going to the Forbidden Jungle or Sentinel Beach. The game encourages you to visit Sentinel Beach first, it being the simplest and easiest level in the entire game. But the catch is that to get on top of the tower with the cannon, you need the blue eco vent to be open, which can only be done in the Forbidden Jungle. So to cut down on backtracking, I actually play Forbidden Jungle first, then Sentinel Beach. A similar moment happens later in the game when you can go to either Snowy Mountain or the Spider Cave. But to go to Snowy Mountain, you have to ride this gondola, which you can only ride on after letting Kira and Samos into the lab, which is easy enough, but then you need to collect 2 more power cells. So therefore, you'd naturally go to Spider Cave first. But getting all the precursor orbs in the final room of the Spider Cave requires the yellow eco vent to be open, which can be done at Snowy Mountain, which is where I go first between these two. Gordy and Willard in this cave sell you 4 power cells, which covers the 2 power cells required to get on the gondola. The only backtrack you have to do in the game is the Mountain Pass, the transition stage between Rock Village and Volcanic Crater. One of the power cells here is locked behind a rock wall that requires yellow eco to bust. But this is before you have access to Snowy Mountain to open the eco vent. So once you do it, you hop back on the zoomer and go backwards until you reach this point to open the path and get the power cell. But this is pretty minor at the end of the day. On my first run for the video, in fact, I almost forgot to do it. That would have been embarrassing, to reach the end of the final level and see I only had 100 power cells instead of 101. But on the note of the collectibles tally, that's another very addicting element of this game. Pausing the game shows you how you're doing with the various collectibles, with each collectible having its own tally. Whenever I think I'm done with a stage, I hit the pause screen and see all the power cells lit up, and that just activates the reward center, you know? That feeling of completion and getting closer and closer to your goals. I also love how each level has a set amount of precursor orbs, and when you collect them all, you get this notification that you have done so, which also activates the same reward system I just mentioned. When doing a 100% run, one of the most satisfying moments is in the final level where you walk towards the last power cell with the final few orbs on the way there, knowing you're about to reach that perfect 2000 out of 2000 on the precursor orb tally, right before grabbing the 101st power cell. This game is just an epic quest like the developers set out to make. Every time I revisit the Precursor Legacy, I'm just taken aback by how addicting the gameplay loop is, how fun the controls are, how massive the scale is, and how you fully explore all these different areas like a forest, a forgotten temple, a dark and mysterious island, a swamp, an ancient underwater city, a mountain, a cave, and many more in just a few hours' time. It's epic. Something you feel for the final time as you reach the final level, Gaul and Maya's Citadel. Throughout the game, you can see that the lurkers are up to something big, but it's impossible for the players to know what it is. All you can do is stop them in their tracks, like on Misty Island. Samos gives Jak and Daxter credit for stopping the lurkers from opening a silo of dark eco that no doubt would have been used for a nefarious purpose. Similarly, in the boggy swamp, the lurkers are using a giant ship with a balloon on top to lift a precursor robot out of the swamp, which you stop them from doing. Samos, again, says that this is a huge victory, although he doesn't know what they'd want a precursor robot for. It all comes together when you reach Volcanic Crater and learn that the sages are gone because they've been captured by the villains we saw in the opening cutscene. This is Gal Acheron, the sage of Dark Eco, and his sister Maya. Needless to say, they don't plan on turning Daxter back into a human. The two have been so corrupted by Dark Eco that they now plan on harnessing enough of it to reshape the world completely. To achieve this, they plan to open the Silos, the most vast source of Dark Eco in the world, but they need the power of a precursor robot to do that. When you reach this level, you find out that Samos has been captured by them as well, so it's up to Jak and Daxter to get through Gal and Maya's Citadel to rescue each of the sages so they can help you get to the final boss arena. Gal and Maya's Citadel is a pretty interesting level, because of the fact that the aesthetic is like the precursor levels we've played previously in the game, but on top of that is a layer of chaotic junk modded onto the area like circuit boards and wires. I just think it makes for an interesting visual mix. Despite stopping them from getting their robot in the swamp, they do still have one working that they've modded with their various scraps and intend to use that one to open the silos, setting the stage for the final boss. This is the culmination of my point that this is an epic adventure. When you get to the top of the elevator that takes you to the silos, you can see in the distance all the places you've been to get to this point, like the Snowy Mountain, and even seeing Geyser Rock and Misty Island out in the distance, just like the artwork promised and the devs claimed repeatedly in the pre-release. You did travel seamlessly from one side of this game world to the other, and now you just have to destroy this robot, making use of yellow and blue eco, powers you've been using throughout the game. And to cap it off, the sages combine their respective eco powers to combat the now open Dark Eco silos, and this creates a type of eco only rumored to exist before, Light Eco, which Jak uses to lay the final blow on the robot, sealing Gal and Maya inside the Dark Eco silos, saving the day. Ending the game as well.
Well, it looks like I may have been too hard on you boys. You do have what it takes to be heroes.
Another thing that hits me whenever I replay this game is that a criticism I often see people levy against Jak and Daxter is that it's mechanically fine-tuned to near perfection, but the game doesn't have much personality. And you know what? I really think that's just not true. The reason people say it is because this game is one with a silent protagonist and a more simple story compared to, say, Ratchet and Clank, which released the year after this, which had a more developing story throughout the game, and a more contentious relationship between its two lead characters. And Sly Cooper also dropped in 2002, and I shouldn't even bring that game up. I mean, how does any game compare to the goated trilogy and come out unscathed? My point is that I see where the criticism comes from, but I personally think it's overstated and is also not true. The writing and characters of Jak 1 are more memorable than people give it credit for. When just looking at the story, I think it's an entertaining plot that's well told. You don't know who the mysterious villains are at the beginning, but they're clearly up to something throughout the whole game on your quest to find Gal to help Daxter get back to normal, but him being the villain connects the dots in your mind, setting up for the climax where Daxter, albeit reluctantly, decides to not use Light Eco to turn himself back to normal because using it to stop the robot is more important. It's not much, but I think what they did is good. And also, when getting into the memorability argument, it's really subjective, simply because my counter-argument is that I remember it quite well. The driving force of the cutscenes is Daxter, and the way he interacts with the various characters is unforgettable if you ask me. Like,
Yeah, lightning moles. We care. Maybe for 2 power cells. Hey, that's one of your vital organs. Walk it off, tough guy.
the NPCs that bounce off of Daxter's energy are also memorable to me. Like when the warrior says,
So full of valor, armor shining in the sun, I climbed the hill to take him on. But he pounded me like one tenderizes a yakao steak.
Have you tried attacking him with your melodrama? 'Cause it's killing me.
most of the cutscenes are Daxter roasting the NPCs you meet, but my favorite cutscenes are with Daxter trading insults with Samos, who's my favorite character in the series, especially in this game where he's one of the few characters who just doesn't take anything from Daxter.
The two of you went mucking around in the only place that I told you not to go, Misty Island.
That's right. And then
And Daxter, you finally took a much-needed bath, but in a bathtub filled with dark eco.
look, old man. Are you gonna keep yapping, or are you gonna help me out of this mess?
I'm gonna keep yapping, because in my professional opinion, the change is an improvement.
But he also genuinely comes to respect the duo's efforts as the game goes on, despite laughing at the idea of them being heroes at the start of the game. The dialogue is burned into my brain for almost every cutscene, so I can't agree that this game lacks personality. I think it's exploding with it. Just not as much as Ratchet and Clank. People tend to hypothesize that the lacking personality was one of the biggest things Jak and Daxter had going against it upon release. But I don't think that tells the whole story. Looking back at the development of Jak and Daxter, it's like this game was lab engineered to be as popular as possible. When Naughty Dog designed the character of Crash, it clearly took inspiration from the Looney Tunes, very Western in style. However, Crash's design was changed in Japan to make him suitable for the market. Naughty Dog didn't want that to happen to Jak, so his design wasn't just their product. Sony of America, Sony of Europe, and Sony of Japan were all involved in giving feedback to the designs of Jak and Daxter, therefore designing characters that would be universally appealing all over the world. They got what they wanted since test audiences in Japan felt Jak had Western influences just going off of his build, but in the West, audiences felt he had anime influences with his hair and his ears. A mix of different art styles that made Jak feel at home in every region was the goal. They even said in the PlayStation magazine that if Jak doesn't reach the same audience as Crash, it wouldn't be for a lack of trying. And that's the thing. Jak and Daxter came out to raving reviews and sold very well. However, it did not sell as well as Crash, and the Jak sequels would suffer the effects of diminishing returns compared to the Crash sequels. As I said, people have cited Jak's character and the game's story as why this is. But I don't. His character is appealing in all regions. The game's story is charming. No, what happened was something Naughty Dog could not have possibly prepared for. 2001 was a big year for the PS2, with Jak and Daxter being the console's obligatory family game. But 2001 was a year that showed you really don't need a family game as the face of your console. Jak 1 is a perfectly executed game based upon the ideals of most 90s platformers, but the market had changed. We can go more in depth on this when covering Jak 2 next week, but let me put it like this. In the holiday season of 2001, the PS2 got iconic games like, yes, Jak and Daxter, but also Final Fantasy X, Silent Hill 2, and Devil May Cry, the first and the most based action franchise of all time, as well as that Gear game people seem to like, and most importantly, Grand Theft Auto 3. GTA 3 and the controversy it caused changed the industry almost overnight, as video games are getting a largely more mainstream, mature audience. So it really doesn't matter what Jak did or didn't do, it's the fact that it's the right game at the wrong time. Games like Metal Gear Solid 2 demonstrated that game players were willing and interested in more complex plot lines. And I should note, I always throw digs at the Metal Gear series, but old fans of mine should know that I'm only 75% kidding when I say I don't like MGS like I used to. Games like Devil May Cry show that the main character can have a little more personality without being straight up annoying. And games like Halo Combat Evolved on Microsoft's Xbox really went to show that the face of a console didn't have to be a colorful mascot platformer. So like I said, Jak and Daxter was a success. It broke new ground on animation and world design, got great reviews, and sold well, but it did not reach the audience of Crash simply because the time of its release was the time the industry was changed forever. And that's that. But when looking at what Naughty Dog did, they made a great game regardless of all that context. I think this game is a true masterpiece because of its rewarding gameplay and satisfying feel. It's a game I can always come back to and know I'll have a good time with, and that's gotta be worth something. The game will always be well made and fun, regardless of whether or not it topped the charts like its contemporaries may have. Which still, like I said, it's not even like it didn't succeed. It's a landmark game in the early PS2 days. I'm just saying that in terms of popularity, it was just the right game at the wrong time. Although on the topic of this being a timeless game, the Precursor Legacy is being decompiled for PC by a passionate team of fans, and I played, at the time of writing, June 17th, 2022, a recently released build, and it's almost done. The work here is incredible. Bringing this game to PC with a bunch of options in native widescreen. Fantastic job. I now have, outside of emulation, a near perfect port of this game to play on my PC. I cannot wait for Jak 2 and 3 to join. This is a super late addition to the script because this only came to my attention like a day before these words are being written, but I just wanted to shout them out because this is great stuff. Links in the description. Although, now that it's been a month since the last sentence was written, I realize you probably already know about this by now, but hey, more spotlight can't hurt. But back on the subject of the game's release, how would Naughty Dog react to this change in the industry going forward? They were somewhat locked into Jak and Daxter given the fact that when you beat the game, you get this promise of a cool reward when you collect at least 100 power cells, and when you do it, your reward is a giant white light behind a door, promising a sequel. Well, we can discuss next week when diving into Jak 2, a very divisive sequel that I can tell you right now is one of my favorite games, so do get excited for that. But that covers it for Jak 1, so in the meantime, I'll say what I always do. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.